I'm going back to mute.
Okay. All right, we'll begin now. Collaborate to Educate Our Sons, CEOS, is a nonprofit, multi-faith organization that seeks to help youth achieve full potential. The organization is built on a set of core values, including trust, character, faith, and service at the local, national, and international levels. We provide programs and services focused on training and mentoring young men, their parents, teachers, and mentors. We do this by conducting workshops, delivering valuable training and correspondence, and providing scholarships to deserving youth. We accept contributions for scholarships, workshops, and the online educational training platform we'll be constructing shortly. It is within this tradition that we have been sponsoring these town hall meetings, which are broadcast live on Zoom, Facebook, live stream, and YouTube. They are designed to assist parents and students gain strength, strategies, and knowledge to cope in this unplanned for but new environment. Let us begin with prayer, offered today by Dr. Hinjugu Talasa, a graduate of Howard University School of Divinity, pastor of the Tacoma Park Ethiopian Oroma Seventh-day Adventist Church, and certified educator candidate at the MedStar Georgetown University Hospital. Dr. Talasa. Dr. Ed, are you there? Gracious God, we thank you for this opportunity we have of meeting once more in this town hall fashion to educate ourselves in principles that will help us survive in these difficult times, especially as boys and men and young men. We invoke your presence and ask that you will be with us, lead and direct, be with each participant, and may we leave here refreshed, invigorated, strengthened, and renewed, we pray. Amen.
I'm sorry, Dr. Melbourne. I was unmute. I couldn't find the channel I was praying to. Sorry.
Oh, okay, well, go ahead.
Let me say too.
Go ahead.
Loving God, we thank you for calling us for your duty at this special time, and also as this confusing and disappointing season where we are living. May your mercy and kindness look upon us and give us knowledge and wisdom to do what we are called to do. God, open the door for young people who scatter around not knowing what they're doing. Inspire us to lead them and to inspire them. We pray in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir. A few instructions before we begin for the audience. Everyone on Zoom is muted. Please do not unmute yourself without permission. Your movement, chatter, and activity will affect the quality of the broadcast. If you have a question or comment, please use the chat. If you have a question for our presenter, please write it in the chat and we will try to have it answered. The topic for today's town hall is Parenting Through CEOS, Part 2. Today I'm privileged to be your moderator again. As you know, I'm an ordained minister, a professor at Howard University School of Divinity, and the founder of CEOS, Collaborate to Educate Our Sons. First, let me introduce the panel. We have Dr. Fred Lee, a 31-year veteran of the police force with experience going from the beat to the office. He's currently an administrative desk supervisor for the technical division branch of the Pentagon Force Protection Agency, which eminently qualifies him to speak on today's topic. Dr. Lee is a father and an ordained minister who holds theological degrees from Howard University School of Divinity. He's also a board member of CEOS. Mr. Mosley has 23 years of experience in local and federal law enforcement, having worked for the Federal Bureau of Prisons and as a police officer for the Pentagon Force Department. He's now assigned to the Pentagon Force Protection Agency, Counterintelligence Branch, serving as a law enforcement expert to the department. He has worked alongside as well as gained the respect and rapport with some of the most prominent figures in the department.
Turn it over. See, that's the side. See, put it against that.
Pastor Steve Murphy is unable to be with us today. Something came up so that he had to attend to, and I think if he's finished on time, he will join us. Gentlemen, will you share with us an opening statement, especially in the light of further developments this past week? You know, we had a very good discussion last week, but since that, new developments have taken place. Do you have anything to add to what you said last week? Dr. Lee.
Good evening to all, and I thank you for having me here today. And in light of the new developments, what has occurred, we still see, unfortunately, another loss of life of an African American. This is different than the other two, but it still holds that another young man has died at the hands of police officers. Regardless of how they've died, they still have died. And we have to address the systemic racism that has infiltrated our country and has embedded itself in our country, not just in the police department, but in our country as a whole. And until we address that situation, we will see these incidences occurring even more. And it's sad to say that this is not going to be the last that we're going to hear of a young African American person passing from a police officer's hand or a civilian's hand. That's all I have to say for now.
Okay. Officer Mosley.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to speak again. To piggyback off what Dr. Lee said, it's unfortunate that we're dealing with this such again. I think as of right now, everyone needs to step back and take a breather. There's a lot of tension going on both sides. And we have to sit down and talk about what's next. What's our next action? Again, on both sides. What's our next action of the leaders, of the protesters? What's the next action of the law enforcement leaders and individuals of law enforcement? And again, I can't reiterate enough. It's just that the tensions can possibly cause things to boil over on both sides. And we need good leadership to take the lead and deal with this situation before it totally gets out of control. but these platforms here, such as this, is a great way to start.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Now we begin from where we left off last week. One would think that in light of the public outcry nationally and internationally to the death of Mr. Floyd, that your colleagues would be more careful, but it appears not to be the case. Would someone be wrong in concluding that there seems to be something systematically wrong with police training, ongoing education, and supervision? Is there accountability? Or do unions get in the way? Who would like to go first?
I'll go first on that. So there is a major issue with training, and I can tell you the situation based off of watching it numerous times that recently happened in Atlanta. That is totally a defective training issue. Again, we train. Well, I can't say we, but because there's all departments train differently. But for the most part, when you're talking about engaging a suspect, the thing is when you deem a threat, you're trained to neutralize that threat. But the problem lies is people are lacking common sense. You know, is there a threat that's going to cause me seriously bodily harm or death? Or is there a threat that I can handle another way? And the thing is, in most cases, you're taught to neutralize a threat. And that's the biggest problem. And that's what law enforcement needs to do, is go back to the drawing board. A lot of the training instructors need to go back to the drawing board and say, we need to change things, because we don't have de-escalation anymore. And we're immediately going to one of our tools on our tool belt. And a lot of cases, we're going to the most lethal tool on our tool belt. And again, that's a problem. There's a bunch of chiefs of police and leaders that came out and they couldn't have said it any better. Is police officers they're supposed to be guardians. They're not supposed to be the barbarians. And that's where, and it's like I said last week, that's where we're failing as police officers. If we have kids that fear us, we're failing as police officers. If we have the community that's fearing us when we stop them or to talk to them, we're failing in that aspect. People shouldn't feel that way when they're dealing with a police officer. And again, it all starts with leadership. It starts with the leadership, because if the chief of police doesn't tolerate that nonsense, then it's a great chance that it may not happen. Again, we can't control everyone. For the most part, if you know that your boss doesn't tolerate that nonsense, and the other biggest thing that I want to say is, as what we need to stop doing as police officers and law enforcement officials, is we need to stop protecting the bad apples in the bowl. Because that's what the public sees. And that's what a lot of them perceive us as, is when you have this bad apple, they're protecting them. And that does happen in a lot of cases. And that's one way that we're going to start building the community's trust again, is when if you're a bad apple, we're going to expose you.
Okay. Dr. Lee.
Yes, there's a huge assumption that all police training is the same. And unfortunately, due to budgets that affect each and every community in each and every county in the United States, some officers are trained better than others. We need to have a training that goes across the board at a level of excellence at a federal standard that everybody is held accountable to. And everybody doesn't always go to a federal training facility so that it's a uniform training. So that there's that problem. The other problem is that what you bring to the police department is your past experience from dealing with people. And a lot of that's not addressed. So then you bring in your past issues, your past behaviors that cause a problem as well. And that problem is you bring in your own ethical morals that may go against what the street calls for, but the fact of the matter is that you're working a job. So some officers treat it as a job, some officers treat it as a career, some officers treat it differently than either of those two situations. Sadly, we don't have enough training that addresses ethical, moral values of human beings. When you have an officer that comes into the city, an inner city that deals with minorities, and then leaves back out, as I said last week, that may be the first time they've ever come into contact with a culture outside of their own. So there's some cultural shock, there's some cultural differences, there's some morals and values that fall into play that affect the rational thinking. And then there's always these scare tactics, these war movies, and these training films that show the bad side and scare officers into reacting faster than the action that's on hand. And the officer wants to get ahead of the action that's occurring. And the problem is that we have to wait to see what the person is going to do before we act on it. Now, I'm sure we're going to get to the shooting that occurred in Atlanta, but at this time, I'm gonna just leave it at that.
Okay. Now, here's a question from a young person. As a young person, if I get stopped by the police, what are the first things I should do? And are there things I should not do?
Well, I'll speak to that. First thing and foremost is to pull off to get to a safe place that you feel comfortable with. And then always remember that you and him are in an uncomfortable situation. So anytime you can alleviate that tension, you first have to calm down. Yes, you're being pulled over by a police officer. That police officer is not intending on to kill you. And I can honestly say that. It's just that your actions may cause that person to act irrationally. So that a young man, a young woman are going to be nervous, and that's a defensive mechanism that everybody has. I know my children have it too. If they're pulled over a question, you're going to get into a defense. You have to learn how to calmly and clearly speak to the officer, as well as take note of what's going on around you. And you have to remember who you're talking to, and not as respect, because respect is earned, it's not given. You respect the badge because that badge is an authority figure, but it's the person that's behind the badge that has to earn that respect. And so an officer should address a person with dignity and respect. And there's a technique that we use in police terminology called verbal judo, which kind of de-escalates the situation from the very beginning. And if officers are not practicing that, not using that, it becomes a weapon as opposed to a tool. If you walk up to a car and you start yelling at people, what's the natural response going to be? a defense. But if you address yourself as good afternoon, I'm Officer Lee. I'm with the Pentagon Force Protection Agency. I pulled you over because you ran a red light. Is there any reason why you did so? Now you told them exactly who you were, you told them where you worked for, and you told them why you pulled them over. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But see, sometimes officers get nervous and get afraid, and they act out of their fear as opposed to acting out of their training. And again, I'll come back to training, because some officers don't get enough training to approach vehicles. They get just enough to get out there in the street. And that's a sad thing. Now, I don't know what happened with Atlanta's training. I can't speak for Minneapolis's training. But I know with the city of Pittsburgh, with the airport police, and with federal law enforcement training facility in FLETC, that training was consistent in addressing these issues. And that's why I'm here for 31 years. And that's why Mosley's here for 23 years. And neither one of us have a complaint against us in any of the jobs that we've been in.
Officer Mosley.
So again, it's like I said last week, respect goes both ways. It's unfortunate that we have to think a different way when police approach us, and we have to think of our safety. But these are the times that we live in, and we have to adapt to that until change does come. So again, my recommendation to kind of piggyback off what Dr. Lee said and what I said last week, if you are pulled over, by a police officer, it's like you said, go to a safe location. There's nothing wrong if you're on a back road, get on your phone and call 911 and say, hey, I'm getting pulled over, but I feel more comfortable driving to a safer location. So that way, by you making that phone call, it doesn't look as if you're trying to elude the police. So because that dispatcher can contact that officer and let that officer know, hey, this individual that you're stopping is going to a safer location. And it's like you asked the question, Dr. Melbourne, last week. There's nothing wrong with recording, but you have to know your laws, because there are some jurisdictions that don't allow it. But again, do it in a respectful manner. Just say, sir, ma'am, based off of the climates that's presently going on, I'm going to record you and myself for your protection as well as my protection. There's nothing wrong with that. And again, my initial response is, when you get pulled over and that officer comes to your vehicle, especially as a Black male, put your hands where they're visible. And again, I hate to have to say this because it shouldn't be necessary, but it's a life safety. It's a life safety thing in today's culture. Keep your hands on the steering wheel. Let him, my hands are where you can see them. Even if you feel that this individual is an agitator and he's trying to get you out of your box and trying to get you to raise your voice and to be combative, don't get sucked into that. Because again, the biggest thing is you walking away from that, and you can always make a complaint later. But again, show that respect. It's that old cliche, kill them with kindness. But just make sure you get out of that situation. Be as respectful as you can, even if that individual isn't. Because if he starts off aggressive, perhaps that's what they want. They want you to become combative. And again, this isn't all officers. This is a very small group of officers. And it's unfortunate that these bad apples are the ones that are getting all the press. but it's like Dr. Lee said, the majority of the officers, they're going to be respectful to you. They're going to, but the key is listen to those first words that that individual says to you. Is he or she raising their voice at you initially, right from they pull you over? So if they're raising their voice at you and they're being aggressive as they're talking to you, well, do you know what you did? And so now you know where you stand. So now you know that my number one goal is to drive out of this situation alive. And again, as it breaks my heart as a law enforcement officer to have to tell people this, but it's unfortunate that these are the times that we live in.
Okay. Now, the second part of the question is a little trivial. Some folks may laugh at it, but it's serious. As a Black man, is one of the first things I should say is, don't shoot me?
I wouldn't recommend that because, and here's the reason why I wouldn't recommend that. Because if that officer is a good cop, which a lot of them are, they may take that offensive. And now that situation just completely goes left. But it goes back to me saying that listen to those first words because they're going to have the first say. You know, I would recommend when they come to your vehicle, don't say anything, you know, because they're going to tell you why they pulled you over. And again, if you know you're pulled over and, you know, because what typically this is what happens. When they pull you over, what they're doing right away is they're running your license. They're running your license plate. So in most cases, they're not going to get out right away because they're either calling dispatch and letting dispatch know I got a black Honda, you know, license plate 123 ABC, state of Virginia. So when you pull over, it's going to be a couple seconds before they get out the vehicle. That gives you time to grab your phone and start recording. If you don't feel comfortable with that camera facing that individual, just put the camera on and put your phone down because now you're actually recording the conversation. So if something goes left, at least you have the conversation recorded. Because typically what happens is when they pull you over, it's like Dr. Lee said, I'm supposed to identify myself. I'm Officer Mosley from such and such department. Reason why I pulled you over is such and such. If they don't give you that and they just come at you in an aggressive manner, then you know that it's a potential for things to go left. So my recommendation, the best thing you can do is just be polite and you know, answer the questions, yes, no, but again, it goes back to knowing your laws. Knowing your laws. What do I have to do if I do get pulled over? Do I have to show my driver's license? Do I have to tell them where I'm going? Do I have to tell them where? But also, again, it's, you know, I don't want individuals to agitate a situation and turn a situation to something that it doesn't have to be. You know, as an individual being pulled over, you can be the de-escalator. Even if that individual is in an aggressive manner, you can be the de-escalator. But the most important thing, especially as a Black man, is me being able to go home to my family.
Okay, in that light.
Question.
One sec. In that light, where can I learn about laws, the laws and my rights?
Mm-hmm.
So most of the police departments, and that's that's another subject I want to bring up. The reason why you don't see a lot of cops getting arrested immediately is because there's a lot of laws that protect cops. So cops don't fall under the same guidelines as a regular civilian. But the majority of your laws are Supreme Court laws. So you can Google any of these laws and But again, there's some state laws, but the majority of the laws that protect officers and what they can do and what they can't do are Supreme Court laws. So you can simply just Google, you know, in the state of Texas, what if I get pulled over by a cop, you know, what do I have to show, or, you know, something of that nature. What are my rights? And you'll have tons of different laws that are, you know, are available to you. But, you know, what I would suggest is just make sure you vet it, because the internet, anybody can put anything on the internet. So just make sure that you vet those laws.
Okay. Now, what should I do, Dr. Lee, if I see police brutality? Should I record with my phone, help the person being brutalized, or do nothing?
The best thing you can be is a trained observer, and don't agitate the situation, but make sure you take a video account of the situation and time stamp it, and then make sure you take the whole picture and not just some of the picture. Only by my saying that is, don't just take what the officer's doing, take the whole picture. And that way, when you do report it, it'll be an objective report as opposed to a subjective report. Now, how you can make sure that happens, because everybody takes pictures all the time. Everybody's camera is always rolling. You don't have to say nothing to the officer. But if you see a person being beaten to the point where that you know that their life is in jeopardy, and you know that they're not doing anything to help them or save them, you can bring it to the officer's attention. He may be so caught up in what he's doing that he doesn't realize what he's doing. Unlike what happened to George Floyd, where the officer was comfortably resting on the man's neck and not making any movements. Had a standby person went over there and tried to move him off of them, they could have got in trouble. They could have got shot. They could have got hurt themselves. But the best thing is exactly what they did. They took a picture of it, and that's why the person's fired today. It's because people took the time out to take a picture of it. And I've been videoed several times and making arrests, making stops, and we have to become comfortable in the fact that we're going to be taking people are going to take pictures of us. The problem is that too many times officers play up to the cameras, or they get upset and they get mad at the camera. They want to take the camera away from you. That's the wrong thing to do. If you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, being where you're supposed to be at, then you have every right to do what you're doing as an officer. And again, we are to maintain peace and order. So if we're doing what we're supposed to be doing and you get into a confrontation with somebody, that camera may help you as much as it may hurt you. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to get so upset because somebody's taking a picture of you. But if we pull our cameras out and start videotaping these guys, as you've seen what happens when they get videotaped, it speaks for itself. It speaks for itself.
Okay.
I want to add on to that question. I would also recommend, if it's a situation where you feel as though someone's getting seriously hurt or possibly worse, if there's other people around, you can have someone call 911 and let the dispatcher also know what's taking place. That way, not only do you have it on camera and you're recording, but it's also getting said on an official network such as the dispatch, because everything that goes through 911 is recorded. So, such as the George Floyd situation, if someone would have called and say, "Hey, this guy he's in medical distress, he's unconscious. You know, we're telling the officer to get off of him. You know, he's not getting off of him." You know, then in in situations such as that, because usually there's a supervisor there as well. So the supervisor at the 911 center can also get on the radio and tell the officer to stand down or whatever the situation may be. But, you know, make sure someone's recording. But also, if it's getting that bad, you know, there is nothing wrong with calling 911 on the police officers, because now that's an official recording.
That's good information to have. Okay. Now, as fathers, what advice would you give to a young man finishing high school who is confused by what he's seeing in America today in terms of the two pandemics and is wondering about the way forward academically?
Well,
Why
young
bother
men,
go to school?
young men today are being faced with so much to deal with as first just being Black young men and being categorized as being rowdy and unruly. First and foremost, if you love the Lord, you should walk in the way that God has shown you as an example. And your parents are that example if they're parents that take responsibility and accountability to your actions. Secondly, as you yourself as a person, you have to realize that there's a greater goal in achieving things in life, and you have to step up and take responsibility for yourself. And that means you have to make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, being what you're supposed to be, and associating with people that are positive. Now, growing up in the neighborhood, in the hood, or whatever you want to call it, doesn't always mean that that's a bad place. Doesn't always mean that you're around the wrong people. But you know the folks that you shouldn't be around. You know the folks that you shouldn't be associating with. And you need to remove yourself from being around them. Because the officers are looking for those guys to act up. That's what they're looking for. Sadly enough, we have a lot of young people that are doing the right thing, but in the wrong place when they're doing it. And they get caught up in a lot of mess that they don't need to be getting caught up in. And they wind up becoming victims of the circumstances. You know, my father always told me, if you're where you're supposed to be, doing what you're supposed to be doing, you ain't got to worry about the police. And that's the thing that we have to tell our children every day when they leave out, is that you're leaving out of the house with my name, with our family name. Learn to respect that, and learn to honor that, and walk in the pride of that, so that even if someone approaches you, you can still stand up and be accountable and responsible. Now, I say all that, but then here we come with, well, what you know, Dr. Lee, well, if I'm doing everything right and all of a sudden I get approached by a police officer for no reason. Well, that police officer has an obligation to treat you with the respect that he wants in return. And if there's a conflict of that, then it is dealt with in a respectable manner. Everybody wants respect, but nobody wants to give it, and nobody wants to earn it. And the problem with a lot of police officers today is they think that the little badge that they hide behind is enough to tell people how to do things and where to go. But you gotta, like I said last week, you gotta get out your car. You gotta introduce yourself. You gotta become more sociable. You gotta let people know that you're a human being and not a machine. And once you do that, folks will understand that you're here for them, not for yourself.
Okay. Now, I have two questions here that I'd like to put together. And this one says that we're afraid for our lives and do not trust police officers due to what we have seen. It does not appear safe for us to stand or to run when we see police officers approaching us, whether or not we are doing anything wrong. If we run, we are shot. If we stay, we are shot. What must we do? And with that, they say encounters with even decent police officers can turn deadly with one wrong move. So where does that leave us?
So again, you know, I can't reiterate enough. Please educate yourself on the laws. And it's our job as parents, if we have young children, to teach our young children we do our research and teach them the laws. You know, I teach my children the laws, as far as what are your rights, know what your rights are, and make sure that someone doesn't necessarily take your rights away from you. But what we have to get away from too is instigating a situation or agitating a situation more than it is. Especially when you're dealing with those bad apples. If you're dealing with a good cop, a respectable cop, that individual is going to treat you with respect as long as you give them respect. And it's like, Dr. Lee said, respect is earned, but that goes both ways. So and again, as law enforcement officers, for our youth to feel that way, we failed. And I can't say this enough, we failed. And it hurts me to say that we failed. A lot of youth perceive us as bullies. They see us as, bullies in a uniform. And that's a horrible thing. You have a lot of good cops that are actually quitting because of that fact, because of all the things that are going on. But it goes back to me saying, if you out the bad apples immediately, we won't be dealing with this type of stuff. Mm-hmm. If you know that this guy's a bad apple and he's doing things that he's not supposed to do, his use of force is, he's being aggressive towards individuals, things of that nature, you need to, as law enforcement officers, you need to speak up against your peers. Because once the community starts seeing that, then they start gaining our trust back. And then that whole thing of the young people or even adults, feel like they don't have to, it's almost like they feel like they have to stop in their tracks and do absolutely nothing. But we also need, and this is taking the police officer side off and putting just strictly the black man hat on, is as a community we need to stick up for one another, and we need to educate ourselves. And I noticed that we had a question on here, and I don't want to get off topic too much, but about the black on black crime, mostly in urban communities. Do you think we should focus the problem first? Is this the reason why our cities are being ignored? Well, that goes back to the community sticking together and doing what's right. So if we see something take place in our community and something criminal in our community, we need to get rid of that element out of our community. And it's the same thing in the police force. If you see that, Joe Smith is a bad cop and he's doing all these bad things, then we need to get rid of him, because he's going to make all of us look bad. And it's the potential of one of us getting hurt or killed. And that's what's happening now, is you have a lot of law enforcement that's being targeted, but a lot of these guys are good guys, but just because they they wear the uniform and they represent law enforcement, there's a target on their back. But I also say to some of my non-Black counterparts, I says, what I just said and how a lot of law enforcement feels right now, as a Black man, that's how we feel the majority of the time when there's a police officer. We feel like because we're a Black man, we automatically have a target on our back. And that's horrible. And again, as law enforcement, we fail. And that's where the whole leadership portion comes in. It starts from the top.
Anything to add, Dr. Lee?
Yes. As I'm sitting here listening to Officer Mosley, it just reminds me of how far we have come as far as law enforcement, but how short we are from getting to where we need to be at. And where we need to be at is more accountable to the public. And it's this whole thin blue line mess, that there's a thin blue line between us and the public. We need to get rid of the thin blue line. It just needs to be, we are here to serve and protect the community. And then when we start being adversaries of the community that we're policing and that we're servicing, then we will gain a better respect from that community, whether they be Black, white, Hispanic, or Asian. We truly have to stop with this us against them mentality, because it's not working. All it's doing is creating a division amongst peoples. And when I take off my clothes and go home in regular uniform, regular clothes, I'm subject to be stopped just like you are. I'm subject to be harassed just like anybody else. I've been pulled over going up Suitland Parkway, and officer was very smart with me until he recognized that I had my badge. But what if I didn't have my badge? What if I didn't let him know I was a police officer? That situation could have been another George Floyd or anybody else that has passed away from a cop's hand. So it's just not us against them. It is a systemic problem with race. There's a systemic problem with racism in this country, that because I have a badge, I have authority over you, and I can tell you what to do. And if you don't do it, you're going to go to jail. Or if you try to resist me, I can shoot you and get away with it. Yeah. For our young men, that is a sad thing to hear. But the fact of the matter is you got to go home to your family. And I'm not telling you to bow down to people, but you got to use common sense. You got to use your head. And in this climate, as I tell my sons, you think first before you speak. If you're with somebody, tell them, don't say anything. Let's listen to what they have to say first. Because most times in the traffic stop, it's the passenger that gets the driver in trouble. Because the passenger wants to say something smart, it sets off the police officer that triggers a situation. So in order everybody to go home safely, you just have to be quiet and listen to what they have to say and then respond. Don't react. Learn to respond to situations instead of reacting to them. And everybody will go home a lot safer.
Okay. Let me remind the folks that if you have a question, you can put it in the chat and we will answer it from there. Now, this question says, I want to be in the police force, but lately I've been feeling a little discouraged. Maybe I can go in to help and make changes. Is it worth it? What do you have to say as police officers?
I say, okay. I want to jump all on that question.
Yeah.
I want to say this. We need you. We need the reflection of the community to be represented in that manner. And I would hate for you not to choose the law enforcement position because of what you see out here. That should encourage you to be a police officer because of what you see out here. If we had more young men to take up the career of law enforcement, then understand what it is to be in their community, then we would have less of these situations. Now, I've been doing this for 24 years. I mean, 24 years as a supervisor. And I can say this, as a recruiting supervisor, I really wish I could have hired more blacks in the police department because the majority of the community is black oriented. But because they didn't want to come out, they didn't want to join, they didn't want to sign up, you had to hire who was available. So I encourage every young black man, every young black girl to join the police department so you can make that change. We have to learn how to, if you want to beat the enemy, you got to learn how to beat them from within as well as from outside. And there's nothing wrong with this career. It served me well, it served my family well. I feel very privileged and very honored to be in law enforcement for as many years as I've been in there.
Okay. Now you have seen Melbourne's 10 tips for boys and young men. But I'm going to skip that and go down to Pledge of Honor for police officers. Let me read it so our audience can become aware of them, and then I'd like you to react to it. Pledge of Honor for police officers. All life come from the hand of the Creator. I will therefore value the life of all humans equally. Number 2, life is precious. I will therefore treat all black, white, yellow, etc. life as precious and valuable. Number 3, no person is more valuable than another. I will therefore treat all persons with respect and dignity. 4, black, like whites, are considered innocent until proven guilty, not the reverse. I will practice this. Number 5, I will use my gun as a last resort, not the first choice. Number 6, I won't willfully or deliberately use any procedure that brings harm to another human without just cause. Number 7, I will choose to treat others as I would like to be treated if our roles were reversed. Number 8, I will honor the fact that my job is to protect and preserve the peace, not to execute justice. Number 9, the pledge grants liberty and justice to all equally. I will practice it in my daily interactions. And 10, Black lives matter, brown lives matter, all life matter. I will ensure and protect the lives of all peoples equally and fairly. How do you react to that?
Your number 10 sums it all up, Doc. The 1 through 9, I can agree with, but number 10 is right, spot on. All lives matter. And it shouldn't matter if you're black, white, or red, or brown. Life is precious. And I didn't give you life, God gave you life. God gave me life. And I'm to respect that life. And as an officer, I'm supposed to respect life and encourage those that are working with me to respect life. So those are great tips, but 10 stands out for me as the catch-all for all the other 9.
Officer Mosley.
So I'll start off by saying initially piggybacking off of the previous question that you posed for other individuals wanting to get in law enforcement. So I have this analogy, which I tell my kids, I tell good friends of mine, and some young kids that I try to mentor to, is everything is based off of how you look at it. Everyone perceives things differently, and life it's like a game of chess. You're playing this game of chess, and you make this wrong move, and so when you play that game again and you get into that situation, you know that was the wrong move and that caused you to lose. So that being said, it's your decision. Do I make that same move and risk me losing, or do I make a different move? And I also say that as young folks tend to make trends. They create history. They make trends. You get a rapper, he goes out and sings this song, and now everyone is singing the song and trying to follow suit. So now what happens is that individual just created a trend, whether it be negative or positive. So it goes to say, as Dr. Lee says, we encourage you to join the police force, because if you can create a trend as a young person, and on a positive level, just think of the changes that you can make on a positive level within your community as becoming a police officer. And having this notion, well, you know what, I'm going to be in leadership in the police department because I want to make a lot of positive changes within my community. So if that's your passion, please do so. I encourage it. Majority of police officers, the good guys, will encourage it, and that's why you have, and you still have, a lot of police officers that get into that particular field because they want to help, or whatever positive reason that they have of wanting to be a police officer. Now going back to your the 10 questions. I mean, it's the 10. I'm sorry. They're spot on, and it's there's some of them that stand out more than others. It's especially the first one. All life came from the hand of the Creator. I will therefore value the life of all humans equality. To me, that's huge. And again, if I have that instilled in me as a police officer, I may think twice before I take someone's life. I may think twice because I know that, the Creator made you just like me. You're my equal. Even if you're committing a crime, it doesn't, it's that saying, a sin is a sin. Just because, you stole something, this individual killed someone, a sin is a sin. So when I arrive on a scene, I can't, unless there's an immediate threat towards me or others, I can't perceive you to be someone different just based off of the color of your skin, what you're wearing, what you look like. It's just because, again, it's that old cliche saying, you can't judge a book by its cover. I needed to run out and grab some milk, and I threw on, some slippers and, a t-shirt because I was just painting, and, I don't look the part. But I'm getting judged based off of what I look like. And, I watched, this was years ago. I think it was, I want to say it was Montel Williams show. And he got up and he says, there's there's 5 people in this audience that are multimillionaires. And look around and see if you can point out who the millionaires are. So immediately everyone went to the majority of the white guys that were dressed in, you know, business suits or had a tie. And so finally, when he told the individuals, the 5 millionaires to stand up and come on stage, a lot of people were shocked. So 3 of them were African Americans. So he asked a question and he asked certain people, he says, well, what did you think this guy was? And somebody says, yeah, you know what? I looked at that guy, but, you know, I thought maybe he was like a rapper or something. But again, but he was, it just so happened that he was one of the few that he wasn't a millionaire. He was actually a billionaire in the crew. But it just goes back to, and that's the thing with law enforcement is, you know, we have to change our mindset. You know, we have to change our mindset on how we look at things. It's just like when an individual, you know, seeks Christ and crosses over, you change your mindset from your worldly ways to now you're changing your mindset to everything Christian. But you know that, okay, this was negative and I have to change my mindset now to be something positive. And the most important reason why I'm doing that, not only for myself, but so I can help others. And as police officers, that's the way that they have to start thinking. That's the training that needs to occur. My job is to protect and serve.
Okay. Quick question. Do you think any of your peers would have a problem with any of these 10?
Absolutely. The individuals that don't want change or they feel as though they know everything, because we have those individuals in every career set. I'm sure everyone that's listening have come across one of those individuals or multiple individuals. But there's nothing in there that's negative. So again, everything in there is positive in nature. But you know, you're always going to have someone that tries to pull something negative from each and every situation. But as a whole, I think the majority of individuals will find it quite refreshing.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to ask each of you to make a final statement. Or is almost up. It's gone.
Again, I thank you all for having us in this forum. We need to continue to open up this dialogue to be able to hear. I would love to hear from others as well as what they thought of this and if it was helpful to them. My final thoughts are simply that we as the people have to be better to each other. And regardless of race, creed, or color, we got to be better to each other because God made us. We didn't make us. God made us. And until we learn how to do that, we're always going to run into these conflicts. I mean, America is notorious for bullying people. And until we stop bullying and start loving, we're always going to have these conflicts. Now, this too shall pass. It'll subside, and then something else will occur, and it will rise up again. But we have to get rid of that bullying mentality if we're going to make a change. And we need to make that change first by looking in the mirror ourselves and make the change within us. And as my fellow colleague said, you know, we have to first start with ourselves and then move out from there. And as Christians, I'm the walk that Christ walked. Loving each other, loving even to the cross. He loved he loved all mankind. He died for mankind, but he rose for mankind. And because he lives, I know that I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And because he lives, I know that I can be a better person. And that's why I became a minister and I became a pastor in my law enforcement capacity, because I want to be known as a peace officer, not a law enforcer.
Thanks for the opportunity again. It was a great dialogue. I like to close by piggybacking off of what Dr. Lee said. Change is a beautiful thing. You know, we know that there's a lot of people that are afraid of change, but you have to welcome change, and change is just is such an amazing thing. But we have to use this time. I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason, to include the most traumatic situations that happen in life. And there's something positive that can come out of every situation. Such as right now, we have an amazing platform. It's going to take a lot of work for this change to occur, but we have to keep this dialogue going. And we have to keep 2 steps ahead of the race. You know, we have to come up with the game plan. What is next? You know, what do we do next? What do we do next as police officers? What do we do next as leaders? What do we do next as Christians? You know, so forth and so on. We have to, and you know, and I always call that the I call that the Obama effect. Obama was always 2 steps ahead of when they try to pull him down. And that being said, is change, welcome change, but be a voice. But not only be a voice, be a positive voice.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank you. And I'd like to close with summarizing these 10 tips for young men. Conquer your fears. Don't let them conquer you. Choose your friends wisely. Love those best who love Christ most. Have a cause to which you are committed, that you'd rather die than give up. Know yourself. Know your limitations and your buttons. Don't let anyone determine your actions or your reactions. Better to walk away than lose your life or end up in jail. Be fit and enjoy life to the fullest. You are young only once. Be honest with yourself and with others. Take no one for granted. Each person is a child of God. Set goals for your life, both short-term and long-term. And think before you speak. Listen twice as much as you speak. God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Over to Mr. Daly.
Thank you, Dr. Melbourne, for leading us through a challenging but needed discussion. Thank you for your Melbourneism to give us a good summary. A tip of the hat to Reverend Lee and to Officer Mosley. Thank you for your boldness. Thank you for putting a human face on policing. Thank you for your seasoned wisdom. Thank you for being men of faith. Thank you for representing all that's best about policing. And thank you for giving us fruitful tips on how we can manage these difficult times. They are certainly difficult times, but because we're people of faith, we can see green shoots of hope by having 2 officers like these today, recommended so strongly that we need our young men to be engaged in policing to make a big difference. So thank you so much for that positive endorsement. We have to continue to use our faith as our resources. We have to continue to have gentlemen like these to give us the wisdom, insights that we need through challenging times. We also like to thank Mr. Devon Hines for making the magic happen for us to be able to broadcast this both on Zoom and on live stream channels that CEOS has. So thank you so much, Mr. Hines, for making it so seamless for us this evening. Our conversations continue, folks. Next week, we invite you to come back same time, 5:45, and we'll be dealing as when you have such a challenging time, your mental health becomes a major issue. And so next week, we'll be tackling that very important topic of our mental wellness as we face this polarity of pandemics. So join us at 5:25 next week. Invite a friend, be safe, be wise, and see you then.
All good, my friends. See you 5:24 next week. God bless.